Hello? I guess it's on. I have a few booklets here. Would anyone want one of these? This is the annual report booklet.
This goes forward, that goes back.
I think we're ready to get started. Welcome to our spring 2023 congregational meeting. I'm Ada Schmidt-Thiessen, the church moderator, and I thank you all for coming to attend this today. I also know that for some of you, you're giving up a valued Sunday school time period, and so I thank you also for being flexible and for taking on this spirit of compromise at this point in time. Thanks a lot. We want to start by reading our purpose together, and I will lead, but let's all join together in saying this. Our faith in a God of love leads us by the power of the Spirit to follow Jesus in doing justice, loving mercy, and walking humbly with God. And let's pray together. God of creation, we feel your presence around us in the spring warmth and sunshine, in the smell of lilacs, the beauty of spirea and iris, the chirping of birds, and in the new growth emerging from the earth, as well as in our church. You are the God of creativity and regeneration. Be with us now in this season of growth. Generate in us new energy to do justice, to love mercy, and to walk humbly on our journey with you. Fill us with confidence in your plan for us and a sense of excitement about new endeavors. We ask for your presence now in this meeting as we do the work of being the church together. Help us listen for your voice. Help us act in ways consistent with your love. Amen. As we turn to the agenda, I want to give just a little bit of context ahead of time. June 1 is the first day of our program year. And so in this meeting, our congregation traditionally elects new board members. And it's also a time to report about what has happened in commissions and committees over the past year. You have had a chance to read those reports that were emailed, and there are also some program booklets that you may have picked up in the foyer, and there are a few that have been passed around this morning. I just want to say that I thank all the authors who wrote the reports. It was impressive to read and understand all the work that has been going on this year. Thanks so much. Our church is rich with people and talent and people who have done much during this last time. As you look at the agenda, you'll notice that we're not hearing reports from each of the commissions or committees. You can read that. That's your homework assignment. But we will be hearing from people about some new initiatives. We'll, of course, also have election, and we will hear about the search committee, as well as the Credence Report. So we start with approval of the congregational minutes that you may have read ahead of time. Are there any comments or changes? If not, is there a motion for approval? Marlene? And a second? Is that Tim? Tim Hodge? All in favor say aye. And opposed? Okay. And so we turn then to our next item of business, which is turning things over to the Gift Discernment Committee, and Dale Schrag, who has been chair. He's just completing his term, and we thank him for this amazing work that this committee does every year, and all the other committee members as well.
Do you have the slide up? No, you don't. Oh, no, I don't have it on there. I don't have it. Okay, you will find the slate of nominees on page 9 of your program book. I want to begin by thanking the other members of the committee: Jerry Buller, Elaine Prouty, Jeanette Stuckey, Francis Taves, and Roger Neufeld-Smith as the staff liaison. I want to say that it was a very good year for the Gifts Discernment Committee, a much better year than some other years. Most people said yes when called. Most folks who were eligible for a second term agreed to serve a second term. We put some new folks on commissions. It's been a while since we've had a member who was also a high school student, which we now have for the Hospitality Commission. That ought to bring some new ideas there. A couple of exceptions that you should note. You will recall that Mary Ellen Hodge has been appointed to a third term on the Faith Formation Commission. That third term was approved formally by the church board. I think the answer is fairly simple. I think Mary Ellen is a missional entrepreneur. I think the Faith Formation Commission performance in the last year has been one of the bright spots of our church year, and we decided if you've got somebody who's making it happen, by all means, keep her on the commission. The second is you'll notice that there were only 3 candidates for the Worship Commission. Patty Shelley, Adam Robb, and Esther Aish. You may recall that the Worship Commission Task Force recommended that there be from 3 to 5 members on the Worship Commission. There was some discussion in our task group about whether this ought to be applied to other commissions, but we followed the handbook, and if there were 5, if the handbook says 5 members of the Hospitality Commission, we called 5 persons to that commission. My understanding is that the only persons that need to be voted on today are church board people. And if you have your I'm real sorry. I thought somebody else was making this, and I did bad. I've been a fairly bad chair of gifts discernment from the get-go. Anyway, 3 members of the church board are new. Margaret Taves has agreed to serve a 2nd term if you vote her in. Lois Preheim has agreed to serve a 2nd term if you vote her in. And Doug Penner would be the new appointment to replace Adam Robb, who left the church board to join the worship commission. So, on behalf of my committee, I move the adoption of those 3 individuals for the church board.
This comes from a standing committee, and so we don't need a second. Are there any additional nominations or comments at this point? If not, I think we're ready for a vote. And I have a phone number here, and if you are joining us remotely, you may text your vote, yes or no, to this number, and let me read it for you. 620-747-0185. So for those of you who are voting remotely, you may text a vote to that number. The rest of you can simply raise your hands if you say yes to these nominations at this point. And any no's? Okay. Thank you. The folks have been nominated or elected. And I want to also say that we need to thank all of the people who are completing their terms as of June 1. On the board, those are people leaving the board would be Adam Robb for another position, and also Bill Swartley. And they've each made amazing contributions to our board discussions. So thanks to them.
I'm not done. Okay, maybe I will take the time to simply read the other appointments by the Gifts Discernment Committee. Deacon Commission, Carol Buller, Karen Ediger for a 2nd term, and Carol Flickinger. You have a better chance of getting called if your name is Carol. Faith Formation Commission, Mary Ellen Hodge was the only one and approved for a 3rd term by the board. Hospitality Commission, Marlene Fall will serve a 2nd term. Ada Hodge, Elaine Prouty, and Coralie Schenk are the new appointments. Valletta Seymour continues with her 1st term. Witness Commission, Darlene Dick, Zona Gali, and Doug Siemens agreed to serve a 2nd term. Darlene will be serving her 1st term along with Dwayne Friesen and Roger Yunke, who is in his 2nd term. And the Worship Commission, as I've indicated, Esther Aish, Adam Robb, and Patty Shelley. Well, that's the good news. There's a little bit of bad news, and that's that our church is supposed to have 5 delegates to the Delegate Assembly of the Mennonite Church USA actually the delegate session is July 7 and 8. The whole shebang is July 3 to July 8. It's in Kansas City. It's never going to be cheaper for you. The church will pay your registration. You'll have to buy your gas to get to Kansas City, but I think everybody knows somebody in Kansas City who at least has a living room that they'd let you lie on to sleep at night. Pack a bunch of bologna sandwiches, and it will hardly cost you a thing. You'll never find a less expensive MCUSA delegate assembly. Right now, we only have one person committed to going to represent our church, and that's the Right Reverend Roger. So I want you to think about that, and we will be tapping some of you on the shoulder to give you a chance to respond to the call. Thank you.
Well, Dale is very persuasive, and I will just add that I think you'd have a good time with Roger as part of the delegation, right? Yeah. We are moving to the next agenda item, which is a report from the search committee, and Heather Zerger is in charge of this. I'll just say as she's coming up here that we need good people on the search committee, and we've found them. I'm so pleased.
Thank you. So there was an announcement in the bulletin today that really gave a good, succinct, status of where we are on the search committee. I hope to just give you a little more color about what we've been doing. But if you want a good, succinct report, read that announcement, and that gives you basically the status as we sit today. So today I really want to do three things. I want to give you an overall update on our progress. I want to share the results with you of some of the surveys that you have taken, and then I want to open the floor for any questions that you might have to the extent that we can answer them. So the Western District Conference has available on its website some resources for congregations that are in transition. That's us. And one of the things that they have is a form. This may be hard for you to see, but it's basically a form that's used for reporting the progress of our search to the congregation. So I want to use this form to sort of outline my discussion with you today. And it's a checklist, which is great. I love checklists, so this is right up my alley. And it's a timeline as well. So it lists the tasks that the search committee is to perform, and it is our public way of telling you where we're at. So we're going to walk through this together so you know where we are. The first task you'll see is to appoint a search committee. We've done that, and you should know about that search committee. We've been in place for a while, but in case you don't, here are the members of your search committee: Doug Penner, Megan Kohlman, Lois Preheim, John Waldner, and myself. So we can check the first box. The second box is, of course, an orientation meeting with our conference minister, Kathy Neufeld-Dunn, and we have done that as well. So that box is checked also. The third item that we are to do is to gather information and develop a description of our congregation. There's two things really embedded in task number 3. The first is this gathering of information. We did that. You may recall filling out the pastoral priorities survey. We have done that, compiled that information, and I'm going to share some of those results with you very briefly. That then gets rolled into something called a congregation information form. If you've served on a search committee before, you know this form. It's a very comprehensive narrative about our congregation. And I'll talk with you some more about that as well. But first, I want to go over the results of the pastoral priorities survey. This may be hard to read, and I'll just tell you now, if anyone is interested in seeing these results, I'm very happy to share them with you. We have Doug Penner to thank for the compilation and the statistical analysis, but the first 5 priorities that this congregation selected as its most important priorities right now: number 1, the pastor connects the call of Jesus to contemporary issues of justice and peace, developing strategies to engage in what God is doing to restore shalom. Priority number 2, which is similar, the pastor has a good working knowledge of Anabaptist history and theology and is able to connect that history to contemporary questions and challenges. Those two are clearly related in the connection of contemporary issues, social justice issues, and our theology to questions that are affecting us right now. And then you can see the third fourth and fifth, embracing the priesthood of all believers and developing lay leaders, actively participating, planning, leading worship, and engaging in self-care, managing self in the ministry in ways that ensure emotional health, maintain healthy boundaries, and make space for healthy accountability. I haven't gone back to see how these compare to past priorities that we've done when we've done past searches, but my suspicion is that what appears in number 5 may not have been ranked quite so highly previously, and that may be a reflection of where we have come from as a congregation. Whoops. 6 through 10, I won't read each of these to you, but I'll leave this here for a minute in case you're interested in what fell into the top 10 of our priorities. And then I've also got 11 through 16. And then there are more that didn't even make the top 15. So again, if you're interested and if this is something you'd like to study, I'm happy to share these results with you so you can look at them and analyze them and think through for yourself how this came, why this came out the way that it did. So we took this information then, along with past congregation information forms, which sort of formed the beginning of our congregation information form that we filled out. And again, the congregation information form is basically a very lengthy narrative that describes our congregation to potential candidates. It's not publicly available, but it's something that candidates who express an interest in our congregation are given so that they can learn to know a little bit more about us in the event that they don't already know. And it covers things like our facilities, it covers our budget, covers our staffing, covers our theological perspective, it covers just a whole wide variety and detail of information. And so like I said, we had past congregation information forms that we started with, and then we modified it to sort of reflect who we are presently. If you'd like to see this, I'm glad to share it with you as well. We didn't distribute it widely to the congregation because it's very lengthy. It's a very robust form, but you're very welcome to look at it. A few demographics that I wanted to share with you that I think are really interesting in terms of our attendance and in terms of the age of our participants. These are estimates. These are not exact numbers, but our attendance has changed, obviously, since COVID. And if you start at the bottom of this slide, you can see in calendar year 2019, our average Sunday attendance was 228 people. The high that year was 440, and the low was 141. It was similar for the first quarter of 2020 until COVID. Our average was 218. And then, of course, we didn't meet for the rest of 2020 and much of 2021. And now for calendar year 2022, our average is 136, and our high is 227. So our high for 2022 is actually lower than our average was for calendar year 2019. It's interesting information, and I wanted to share it with you. That's reflected in our congregational information form.
That does not count virtual?
It does not count virtual. There are an average of 200 plus views on any given Sunday, but we don't know how many of those are repeat views. In other words, somebody watching and then sitting down to watch again. We can't track sort of independent viewership, but we do have a healthy viewership online. And age demographics. Again, these are estimates. We didn't survey you all on your ages, but we have good information in our church office that helps us pull this together. Thank you, Monica. And you can see how our demographics are spread out and weighted fairly heavily in the 65 and plus age group. So we completed the congregation information form. We shared that with the church board. They approved it. We've shared it with Kathy Neufeld-Dunn, our conference minister, and she has also approved it. So now it is available for any applicants who are interested in Bethel College Mennonite Church and in our open position, and it will be shared with those folks when they express that interest. There's one other important piece of the congregation information form that I want to share with you, and that is essentially our description of the type of pastor that we're looking for, or who we're looking for. And so, we described our position and the pastor we're seeking: a collaborative member of the pastoral team who empowers and facilitates members of a pastoral team and other church staff to lean into their passions and gifts in support of the work of the church. Someone who connects the faith of the congregation to contemporary issues and questions, who empowers and equips members of the congregation for leadership roles, someone who leads the congregation in discerning how to implement the vision, mission, and goals of the congregation, even through uncertainty and conflict, someone who desires to partner with the congregants of all ages in their lifelong spiritual journey, who acknowledges that diverse life experiences have shaped seekers' understanding of God, Jesus, the Bible, and the world in various ways, who challenges us to stretch beyond where we are, leading us on our ongoing faith journey, and connects with Bethel College and other organizations in the community at appropriate times. So, given that Jesus is not available, we'll take someone who fulfills most of these categories. And this obviously comes from the pastoral survey. You saw how the results came in and how we've woven that in here, and from the job description that the church board has prepared with search committee input. We feel very good about this as a reflection of who we are and what we're seeking, and we're anxious to see what sort of candidates respond to this. Whoops. So I'm checking the boxes here. We've got as far as number 4. We've gathered our information on 3 and developed a description of our congregation, and that's now being made publicly available. I should tell you we're also advertising in some publications, including Anabaptist World. You should see that soon. And we are placing advertisements on a handful of campuses of seminaries to see if there are alums or potentially new graduates who may be interested in this position. And those publications are being made now. And on item number 4, consideration of potential candidates, we should hopefully start receiving applications from candidates soon, now that our congregation information form is completed and available. We also received very good feedback from you all with names of people you thought might be good fits. And so we have sat down with our own search committee insights and with your good feedback and developed a list of our own that has been forwarded on to Kathy Neufeld-Dunn, and she will make some initial inquiries with those folks. Can't share any information with you about who they are or how robust that list is, but we thank you for your feedback on that. And so the search now begins in earnest, and that's what I have to share. Hopefully we'll start having applications as early as our May 22nd meeting. So what questions do you have? Thank you.
I'm certain that members of the search committee, if you have comments for them and thanks for them, would be welcome. Would welcome your comments. Okay, our next 2 items. Adam is already coming to the front. The next 2 items on our agenda have to do with the Credence Report Committee. And I want to say that Adam has very graciously agreed to be chair of that committee. And then also one initiative or project of that group is the following agenda item. And I think you'll weave the multi-generational initiative into this report.
Okay, so we, as a congregation and the church board, over the past, 12 to 18 months, have used the consulting services of Credence and Company, or as I call them, the Credence Clearwater Revival. We have used their consulting services to kind of put together some information about our congregation, to learn who we are, where we're from, where we're going, in a time of pastoral transition especially. And some of that work, I think, has helped inform the search committee in terms of what we are as a congregation. I think they have provided a lot of information about us as a congregation and challenged us to think a little differently, or to behave a little differently, or to act a little differently in terms of our normal worship or life or culture flow here in the BCMC congregation. And they also then provided some non-insight on what the pastoral team search model might look like. And that was, to be frank, a little bit frustrating, I think, for some on the board. I think we were hopeful that the Credence information or the Credence report would share some guidance with us as we go into a time of pastoral transition, that we should in fact use a lead pastor model, or that we should in fact use a co-pastor model, and their report didn't necessarily provide that guidance. And so what we have decided as a part of the board, and this was kind of initiated, I would say, by Ada and Margaret Taves, the idea there was that the Credence report provided 4 pieces then that we could actually act on. And those were trying to figure out who we were in terms of a multi-generational congregation. What does that look like? Do we focus on being vibrant and youthful? Do we focus on nurturing the experience and the wisdom we have in this congregation, or is there some place that those can meet? Another one was focusing on the work of the APRC and how the APRC functions and provides support to survivors among us and the work that they are doing. Another one of the areas was in relation to the structure of our church, and how, when you really look at the Constitution and the bylaws of the Bethel College Mennonite Church, there are instances when it says one thing, but in practice we've maybe been doing something different, or we've been living the Constitution or the bylaws differently. And so tackling what the structure looks like becomes an important part of that work. And then also, kind of wrapped around all of that, figuring out what our pastoral leadership model might look like. So, thus is the charge of the Credence Report Task Group, which is comprised of Ada and Margaret and myself and Brad, and Roger is liaising with us as a member of the pastoral staff. And we've had one meeting so far just to kind of share our initial thoughts on how what the Credence report says affects our work, and then kind of as a corollary affects the work of so many other groups in our congregation. Our vision for what the Credence Report Task Group will be is that we are not necessarily going to be a working group. That is, we're not going to have our own initiatives of things, like the Faith Formation Commission is planning the last stages of VBS, and a shameless plug, if you'd like to help out with VBS, I have no doubt that Jill and Mary Ellen would still gladly take volunteers. Perfect. So we're not necessarily going to be looking for volunteers to lead VBS, but what we are going to be doing is working with ways that we can empower different groups within the congregation to work on these suggested areas that came out of the Credence report. All of this with the framework that the Credence report is our guiding document in that. It provides us with the insight, with the knowledge, with the experience we need so that we can continue to use that information to create a healthy, vibrant culture here at BCMC, whatever that might look like, and to create a structure that is inviting to a new member of the pastoral team, and to create an environment that is safe for survivors at our church. So we had our first meeting 10 days ago, And the first initiative that we as a group are going to kind of start to begin our work with is a multi-generational initiative. And for those of you who are very familiar with what's been going on in congregational life over the past 6 to 12 months, and for those of you who aren't, I feel like as a young person, 40, so I guess that's moderately young, early middle ages, not the dark ages yet, but anyway, I digress. So in the early Middle Ages here, as a youngish person, one of the things that's changed drastically for us, our family, has been what faith formation time looks like on Sunday morning. And a huge shout out to the Faith Formation Commission for having the vision to do this, and to Jill and George as staff members for executing, but then also to all of you who participated in that in some way. I know my kids have absolutely found it incredible to meet and be with each of you who's participated in that on a Sunday morning as a way to create a connection. And that's what being multi-generational is about. It's about how do we create connections. Brad and Megan hosted an ice cream social at their place. We had a hot dog palooza at our place. Nathan and Esther and Alan Nadine had Sloppy Joe's at Nate and Esther's house. So we've had several opportunities to participate in that way. The Inclusion Task Force sponsored a Wichita Pride March group that included people of many different ages. We are at the point now in our congregation where we are really prioritizing what it looks like to be multi-generational, and we're looking for avenues in which to do that. But Brad and I are going to start our Credence task work by trying to continue to build that out, to figure out ways that not just individuals with a passion for doing this can do it, and that's great. If you want to do that, that's awesome. And in fact, I think Judy Friesen, are you here this morning? Okay, I think this is safe to say. I think Judy Friesen, and she's maybe getting some help with this, is going to have our next social event at her place sometime in early June. So we'll have that on the calendar at some point, but be aware that we're going to have another opportunity to gather in an outside space on an evening and be social together. And that's awesome because that gets us out of what might feel comfortable. So anyway, Brad and I are going to start by, as we enter a new commission and committee year, we're going to tap commissions and committees on the shoulder a little bit and say, how can we help you? How can you help the church, et cetera, work to be more multi-generational? And Ada Hodge joining the Hospitality Commission, that's awesome. That's part of it, but that's not all of it. How do we put together a service day that involves kids and adults? How do we put together being able to work in the hospitality space downstairs to serve a Wednesday night meal with kids and adults? What does it look like to involve the deacons in something that is multi-generational? And then on top of that, it's the finance committee, it's the worship commission, it's the arts. You know, how do we continue to find ways to involve people of all ages and stages in their life in this congregation and this community to turn this into a really cool, functional, healthy, multi-generational space so that we have old wineskins and new wineskins, and they are together in a symbiotic relationship where we all come here and benefit. So that's kind of one thing we're going to tackle as we get started, and that's one of several paths that the Credence Report Task Group will take. There's also some beginning stages work that's happening as far as looking at structure, policy, and some of our bylaws, knowing that as we change toward a co-pastor model or officially change toward a co-pastor model, the number of times the words lead pastor shows up in our bylaws, I think is a staggering number, somewhere in the 90s. So if we're not going to officially have a lead pastor, we should probably do some work to make that look a little bit more like what our congregation's model is. Roger's already done some work with that and in structuring out a little bit of the who reports to who under our current model versus what our bylaws say and how those might mesh together. So there's also work being done with that regard as well. So it's a great working group. We have members from the board, we have members from commissions, we have people who are passionate about this kind of work, and we will do the work that we think the Credence Report has tasked us to do to the best of our ability, and we hope that as we do that, the vibrancy that we feel right now in this congregation can remain and grow further. Thanks.
I'm not as tall as Adam.
That's not her fault, that's my fault.
Thank you for that report, and I'll just mention that if some of the things that Adam has said strike a note of passion in you, and you would be interested in being involved in some of the things that we've talked about, let me know or Adam know, and we'll see whether we can find a spot for you to be a part of that as well. We turn now to Dale Schrag and a report about the Indigenous Justice Task Group, or is it the Task Group for Indigenous Justice? Yeah, okay.
This time I do have a PowerPoint. Are we up yet? Oh, no. Okay. Over the last year, a group of about a dozen persons has been meeting informally to grapple with issues related to a monthly congregational worship ritual of land acknowledgement. The group's activities have been centered around an understanding that to acknowledge that the piece of land on which the church building is located was once the sacred homeland of indigenous peoples is not enough. Injustice to indigenous people is not simply an historical reality. It is a contemporary reality that cries out for redress. The group has engaged in reading and discussing Sarah Augustine's "The Land is Not Empty," Following Jesus in Dismantling the Doctrine of Discovery, available in our church library, helped to organize the Loss of Turtle Island simulation experience and follow-up discussion. This follow-up occurred at a wonderful carry-in meal in the fellowship hall that featured the three sisters. Whoa. The three sisters, the Indian staples of corn, beans, and squash. The group has studied other books together, taken educational field trips, including a visit to the spectacular new First Americans Museum in Oklahoma City. The group has also become affiliated with a larger group of faith-based organizations, one of which is the Mennonite Church USA, seeking to participate in repair of damages wrought by the forced removal of tribal peoples. This is the Repair Network, a binational organization whose goal is to actively support restoration of right relationships with Native peoples. The Repair Network seeks to dismantle the doctrine of discovery, an international legal principle still in effect, which essentially claimed that any lands not occupied by European Christians or their descendants were empty and could be claimed by the European powers. Our task force has been in contact with Repair Network staff, Sarah Augustine, Katarina G., and Michaela Esau, who is an MVS volunteer from First Mennonite Church in Hutchinson, via email and Zoom. The Repair Network organizes and encourages public advocacy and activism on behalf of indigenous populations. Here you see members of the Albuquerque Mennonite Church demonstrating in support of the Indian Child Welfare Act, which seeks to correct the long-standing practice of separating indigenous children from their families and extended communities, placing them instead with white families. The Repair Network is also very much committed to supporting the Apache Stronghold in its efforts to preserve and protect the Oak Flat in Arizona, a very sacred space for the Apache, from being now supposedly about to be leased to a foreign copper mining country. I must have a heavy thumb. The Indigenous Justice Task Force here at BCMC has held 2 public prayer services in response to the Oak Flat issue. The first occurred on the front lawn of the church, the second on a cold and windy day by the pickleball court on Anderson Avenue in North Newton. Should have used my remote. Anyway, what? Wow. Okay. There's the one by the pickleball court. Now, I wonder if perchance some of you are getting nervous, concerned that this indigenous attachment to the land and the natural smacks of a heterodox pantheism, worshiping nature instead of worshiping God. If so, I'd like to offer a few comments in response. Of all of the wonderful anecdotes in Robin Wall Kimmerer's amazing book, Braiding Sweetgrass, also available in the BCMC library, the one that has stuck with me the most is Kimmerer's recollection of her father, a citizen of the Potawatomi Nation, always taking that very precious first cup of coffee in the morning and pouring it onto the earth in an act of respect, appreciation, and homage to the precious planet on which we dwell. This concern for the earth is very indicative of indigenous peoples. It's been suggested that if you ask Europeans or their descendants to place animals, plants, earth, humans, and God in hierarchical order, you will likely get this result: God, humans, animals, plants, earth. If you ask indigenous persons to do the same, you are almost certain to get this result: Creator, earth, plants, animals, humans. Which, when you think about it, is exactly the order of creation in the book of Genesis. But each one is totally dependent on the one before it. So humans aren't right below God. Humans are right below the animals. Still troubled by pantheism? By animating the inanimate through excessive devotion to it? I would remind you that you used to sing it frequently. I say used to because, to my amazement and dismay, this song was dropped from Voices Together. Speaking of animating the inanimate, let the whole creation cry, heaven and earth awake and sing, sun and moon uplift your voice, night and stars in God rejoice. The photos of the BCMC folks The photos of the BCMC folks praying in support of the Apache stronghold in Oak Flat were taken by Weldon Schloniger. I submit that one can hear much more clearly the Son's Alleluia when you take the people out of the picture. The Indigenous Justice Task Force anticipates bringing to the congregation a recommendation that BCMC formally join the repair network. The group also anticipates helping to host the Coalition to Dismantle the Doctrine of Discovery's annual meeting this summer in Hutchinson at First Mennonite Church, where it will meet following MennoCon 23 from July 8 to 10. Members of the BCMC task group intend to attend the all-day repair network training toward right relations on July 10, offered by Sarah Augustine and Katarina G. Thank you. Questions?
Thank you very much, Dale. That was very informative and inspiring. And we turn to our next agenda item, which is Elizabeth Schmidt with talking about Congregational Care Coordination.
Thank you, Ada. So I'm Elizabeth Schmidt, and I'm here as Congregational Care Coordinator, and I'm moved to share that it's been wonderful for me these past 4 months, what a rich treasure of stories live and move and have their being within God's story here at Bethel College Mennonite Church. These past few months, I've been enriched to get to know some of them and visiting over coffee in homes, in hospitals, long-term care settings, and visiting different faith formation classes and visiting different groups and gatherings. What's in the works? Today, I'm happy to share that at our last meeting, the Deacon Commission approved something that we're calling Care Connections. And it's a more coordinated way of connecting volunteers and needs for caring connection. And this is something that's both old and new in that it's things that people have already been doing, just finding new ways to help make more connections with things that people may not know, needs that people may not know about otherwise. And so, just so you know, activities have already been occurring, and we're looking forward to watering these seeds and seeing growth. So Care Connections does include reimagining what used to be known here as Visitation Committee, and that is a way that connects and coordinates in-person visits. And there will also be, and are already happening, other ways of providing care and support, whether it's through food or care packages or phone calls or emails or other kinds of special event activities. And I just want to sow some seeds here too, that anyone, it could be an individual, it could be a household, it could be a Sunday school class or any group that gathers, is welcome to volunteer. Just let me know of your interests. And so here's an example. If your class or group is going to have a cookout, maybe you can grill some extra burgers or steaks, and I can connect ways to get them to some people who would love eating a cookout meal, who aren't going to be able to go to the grill or join you at the table, but would just sure enjoy that food. So it's starting to think in terms of think connection, if you're gathering and there's somebody that you know that is having a health issue, there's maybe an opportunity to circulate a card and get a bunch of well wishes together. Just a way of thinking about what are we already doing that we can add a connection to. And so this is part of the excitement that I'm interested in nurturing and seeing grow further. So I guess all in all, I'm really moved to say that, we've been blessed, and so that we have an opportunity to be God's blessing to others. Thank you.
Thanks, Elizabeth. I am truly excited for the work that Elizabeth is doing in our congregation to make connections. And I think she's inviting all of us to be a part of doing that, either formally or informally. Thanks so much. Are there other items of business or announcements that people have at this point? All right, thank you. I just want to say that I have appreciated today's meeting for the richness that has been displayed in the work that's already being done and the promise of future activities and initiatives and the many people who have offered their contributions to the church. Thanks so much. I will formally declare this meeting adjourned. Thank you.